Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be giving a couple of shout outs to some brand newish channels, and then I'm going to be doing a response video to Michael Wertenberg's top 10 best openings in horror fiction. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, I discovered a couple of channels last night and I haven't done this for a long time, and I really need to do a little bit more of this, supporting more small booktube, because I enjoy doing that and there's so many great channels out there that need a bit of a push. So I've got two channels here for you. First one being Literary Love. It's up here. Now this channel's got 22 videos and 77 subscribers. And the about section basically says it's a book lover. She's a book lover with an MA in English and a passion for the horror genre. My kind of girl. And she speaks from both an academic and a fun angle. And our interesting thing now is also she is going to be submitting her thesis very shortly. I think end of this week or even this weekend, I'm not sure. And so yeah, I just wish her all the best of luck, and I know you can do it. Be strong and be true to yourself and it'll be a success. So that is Literary Love, go check her out. Okay, and the second shout out is for another channel I discovered last night, and that is Crizzy Books. Now this channel's got 48 subscribers, 32 videos, and he loves books, manga, comics and graphic novels, and he says what I lack in brains I make up for in charm. No, I disagree. You got a lot of brains and your booktube newbie tag was awesome. You're very well spoken. Now I think you're going to go far, and I look forward to your whenever you talk about horror books, because I think you've got a lot to say and a lot to offer to the community. And so yeah, look up both these channels. They're really awesome, and remember it's important to support smaller booktubers. So check them out, see if you like their content, and then give them a like and subscribe if they appeal to you. Right. Okay, let's get to the top 10. Before we do, this video is a response to an awesome video put on by Michael Wertenberg, who did his top 10 horror openings of all time. And I actually decided to do this because I watched another YouTuber, another booktuber called Gareth from Book Songs and Other Magic, I'll link him below as well, who basically talked about response videos, and he's surprised that people don't do more of these. Someone makes a video that it kind of clicks with you, that you give a response. So similar to tags, you're therefore spreading your channel and the other person's channel. So you're kind of doing things, kind of letting the world know what's going on. And I've seen other ones as well from other bigger channels, like Michael K. Vaughan, who does a movie kind of response to other channels, which I'm kind of keen on doing as well. So I might do that in future as well. It's just a fun way to respond to what other people are saying on BookTube, especially if you've got opinions about it. So yeah, it's kind of fun. But the difference between this video and Michael's video is that I'm not going to talk about classic authors or necessarily very good books. I'm not going to talk about one-liners and short stories and introductions that might be creepy and that might draw you in, but they're not terrifying, they're not shocking. I'm going for the shock value. I'm going for the terrifying, horrifying value of these books and of their introductions. So my video is going to be a little bit different in that regard. So as I said, there are actually 2 DNFs on this list. So these are not my favorite novels, but I have to say that the openings are absolutely sort of jaw-dropping and eye-opening, and the kind of thing like what the have I just read? So yeah, without further ado, let's get going. Okay, right, so my first book and my first pick at number 10, and this is kind of going in order from 10 to 1, especially the last 4 or 5 are truly terrifying openings, so just be on the lookout for that. And number 10 is Rex Miller, The Slob. Now, a slash above the rest. And Stephen King says, a slob is almost too crudely terrifying to be read, but it is too compelling to be put down. That's Stephen King himself. And now, just to tell you, a lot of these books are not that great, or maybe they are. Maybe I need to give them more of a chance. And this was my first DNF. I don't know why I DNF'd it. I kind of was enjoying it, but the writing was a bit much. But the kills were pretty awesome. And one thing this book does do is draw you in. It gets you into the story almost straight away, introducing you to the character, the slob. Now listen to this opening paragraph. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be doing some reading, and some of it is going to be very graphic. So it's a horror channel. If you don't like what I say, well, don't tune into a horror channel. Okay, let's start. Her first awareness of him is a presence, unseen, a stench. It comes around the corner before him, preceding his physical entrance, in a sickening downdraft that washes over her, and she recoils from the smell, which is a combination of rank body odor and sewage and sulphurous stink of rotten food, and it assails her nostril with the foulness of evil. Then, seeing him, she reflinches again, fighting to regain her composure, resolutely, politely, trained to serve the public. Now, she's waiting on him, so it's just an introduction to him. But when he leaves the restaurant or the supermarket or wherever it is they are, he has a few things to say. Well, first of all, he's death personified, demoniacal, unstoppable, bloodthirsty, and very, very real. He wrenches open the door of the stolen car and tosses a sack of food into the passenger seat as he crashes down behind the wheel, the springs groaning in protest. He thinks how easily he would have killed this aloof woman behind the counter in there. How pleasant it would have been to sink a sharp object into her throat, ripping down across... Okay, I'm going to stop there. Yeah, so it's pretty damn graphic as an opening. It's pretty shocking, pretty violent, and it gives you a good indication of what this book is about. A relentless serial killer. Yeah, he's truly despicable, and in some minds kind of unstoppable. I don't know why I put this down, but I'll pick it up again sometime. That is Rex Miller, Slob. Okay, 9th position, we've got my one and only YA entry in here. But don't be fooled, this opening grips you by the throat and never lets go. And that is Neil Gaiman, The Graveyard Book. Now, think about Neil Gaiman. He writes such fantastical feature. He's not normally known for horror fiction. And a lot of people will say this is more like a dark fantasy. But I have to read the opening paragraph, and it's beautifully illustrated, and show you the opening illustration as well. How nobody came to the graveyard. There was a hand in the knife, a hand in the darkness, and it held a knife. Now, how did he come to the graveyard? Okay, I'll tell you. The knife had a handle of polished black bone, and a blade finer and sharper than any razor. If it sliced you, you might not even know you had been cut, not immediately. The knife had done almost everything it was brought to that house to do, and both the blade and the handle were wet. The street door was still open, just a little, with the knife and the man who held it had slipped in. And wisps of nighttime mist slithered and twined into the house through the open door. Now, this is done kind of off camera, but the killer, at the beginning of this novel, slaughters an entire family and looks for the toddler because he doesn't want any dead ends, and the toddler is missing. Now if that's not a shocking beginning to a novel, a YA novel, no this, then I don't know what is. Yeah, it's pretty hectic. And it's pretty graphic at the beginning, even though you don't actually see the knife slicing into the flesh and killing the mother and the father and the sister. You don't actually see the actual happening, but you get a sense of it. You get a sense of the terror, and you get a sense of the fear. And the fact that he's after the toddler, of all things, because he doesn't like unfinished business. So there's Neil Gaiman, The Graveyard Book, and I highly recommend this book. Okay, the introduction to Wet Work by Philip Nutman. Now this is a little known kind of splatterpunk, horror, zombie apocalypse book. And the interesting thing is that this is the only novel that this author ever wrote before his death. I know that he was involved in comic books and graphic novels and short story collections and short stories. But it is very sad that this little known gem was the only novel by this particular author, because there was a hell of a lot of potential here. This is a great little book. And what I like about this particular introduction, it just pulls you straight into the action. And I just want to read the first paragraph. Actually, no. I'm going to read a little bit more than the paragraph here. I'm just going to skip a little bit, just to get a sense of what's going on here. He is dead, yet alive. And like Lazarus returning from the beyond, opening his eyes and looking with confusion into the face of Christ, Corvino is not aware of what has happened to him. The first electrochemical impulses skip between decaying synapses. Wrapped in total darkness, his body spasms as a second collision of thoughts and memories slam dance him into consciousness. I am awake, asleep, swimming, drowning, dreaming. Okay, let's just go in a little bit. I love you, she says. Suki, Vietnam. Kaleidoscope. Mitra, opium, hash, acid. I don't do that shit. Others stoned, immaculate. Doors. Hendrix painted black, black. And paint it black. Asleep. Awake. Swimming, drowning. Reach for the surface. Floats. So cold, cold here in your arms. Rise to the surface. Okay, so dead man awakening from the dead, not knowing who he is, kind of pulls you straight into a zombie apocalypse novel. And he awakes to a bloodbath, which I'm not going to go into the details. It's in the same chapter, so it gets worse. But yeah, it's just a phenomenal opening to a phenomenal book. Okay, look, I only rated it 4 stars. It has its flaws, but it's kind of a zombie apocalypse meets Black Ops, sort of politics and gunmen and all sorts of stuff going on in this book. And I know that it's relatively unknown, but it's worth checking out. And that is Wet Work from Philip Nutman. Okay, for the next number is number 7, I believe, yes. It's Clive Barker, and I'm going to introduce 2 books at once because it's almost, the one is a follow-on from the other, and they both introduce the terrifying Cenobites that we all know so well from Hellraiser. First one is Hellbound Heart, which is considered one of his best. And then we got Clive Barker, The Scarlet Gospels, which I suppose is not really considered his best, but is still pretty damn good. And once again we've got Screaming Kids Next Door, but that's okay because the people in these books scream as well. And the Cenobites like to rip their flesh apart. And we got Frank in the first one, and this is more of a slow burn, not right at the beginning, not the first paragraph, but there's a sense of tension and dread as Frank is trying to open this puzzle box. And what he's hoping for is he's hoping for some nubile, naked woman to satisfy his ever increasing desire for human flesh and pleasure. But what he gets instead is the Cenobites, and they are not what he expected. And really, they believe that pleasure and pain are intertwined, And yeah, and when they actually do eventually really get to him, they rip him to pieces. Let's see if I can find the section to read. Okay, I like this little passage on page 13. He thought of the tails of the Cenobites, the hooks, the chains. Had they worked some similar surgery upon him, locking him up behind his eyes with the parade of its history? In fear for his sanity, he began to address them, though he was no longer certain that they were even within earshot. Why, he asked, why are you doing this to me? The echo of his words roared in his ears, but he scarcely attended to it. More sense impressions were swimming up from the past to torment him. Childhood still lingered on his tongue, milk and frustration, but there were adult feelings joining it now. Okay, instead of reading any specific passage from this little novella, I kind of recommend that you do it yourself. There's too many, and there's too many to count on. But really, they tease him, and they bring him to his knees, and yeah, and they're just starting, and they pretty rip him apart. And this is a great little novella, and it's a great ending, a great beginning, and a great ending. So this is one of the more subtle ones. You kind of see it coming, but Clive Barker is just brilliant, and when he talks about fear and horror, he does it in such a beautiful way that you can't help but sit up and take notice. So yeah, so that's A Hellbound Heart. The next one, which I am going to mention, is The Scarlet Gospels. Now, this is a lesser loved of the two, and a lot of people did not enjoy this return to the Cenobites and to Pinhead and to Hell. I thought it was actually great. I gave it 4 stars because some of the images of Hell are so vivid, but I love the opening where these magicians get together in the first chapter and they kind of surround themselves with the last vestiges of magic on Earth. These are the last magicians because someone has been hunting them, and that is Pinhead. He wants to get all the magic from the world. And there's a build-up of tension in the first chapter, very much so. And then in the second, Pinhead makes his entrance and literally tears the whole group of them apart in the most absolutely disgusting, terrifying, horrifying way that only Clive Barker can describe. So yeah, let me see if I can find the section to read you, and just wait for a second. Okay, the only thing I've got for you right now is whatever torments he had planned for these last victims, and his knowledge of pain and the mechanisms would have made the inquisitors, I suppose that's the Spanish Inquisition, look like schoolyard bullies. It would be worsened by orders of magnitude if any of them dared utter that irreverent nickname, Pinhead, the origins of which were long lost in claim and counterclaim. And I've actually looked up the horror from this particular chapter, and I don't think any of it I need to actually talk about on Booktube. Yeah, it's sexual, it's violent, it is absolutely appalling, and I'm not going to actually talk it. I'm not going to read it. You need to do it for yourself. And that is Clive Barker's The Scarlet Gospel. Okay everyone, and in 6th position we've got the only actual extreme novel on this list. All the rest are very normal, but this is a novel that I DNF'd, and it's called The Resurrectionist by Roth James White. Now, just because I didn't enjoy the whole novel, didn't think the writing was that great, the opening was frickin' terrifying, and set the tone for this particular character and for this novel. It is absolutely hardcore extreme. Roth James White does not hold any punches, and I just want to read the first page and you can decide for yourselves. Dale walked slowly down the hall, yawning and rubbing his eyes as he tiptoed to his parents' bedroom, where the screaming was increasing in intensity, growing even more shrill and agonized. He shivered despite his flannel pajamas and held his comic book clenched tight in his fist like a security blanket, rolling it up and squeezing it up until the pages creased and wrinkled and the cover torn. He hadn't slept yet. He'd been lying in bed reading The Man of Steel, trying not to fall asleep until the fighting was over. Just as he had every night, he'd laid awake, listening to the wet smack of knuckles striking flesh, the roar of his father's angry voice, and his mother's own shrill, defiant retort, not backing down until the blows began to fall without relent. Then, when his mother had been beaten into silence, that horrible sound would come, that squishy rhythmic smack of flesh against flesh, mingled with grunts and groans and his mother's muffled sobs. And part of him had always worried that someday his father would go too far and he would wind up an orphan. A part of him figured it was inevitable. Okay, I'm going to stop there, because the more I go on, the worse it gets, what he discovers in the bedroom, so I'm not going to talk any more about that. But this is brutal, and it is one of the most brutal openings that I've ever read in any horror novel, and that is The Resurrectionist by Roth James White. Okay, in fifth position we have Heartsick by Chelsea Cain. Now this is about a serial killer. Well, the opening is about the serial killer anyway, and it's a serial killer that can definitely stand toe to toe with Hannibal Lecter or with any of those monsters kind of dreamed up by Thomas Harris, any of those serial killers. This woman, in my opinion, is worse. She's killed over 200. She gets other people to do things for her, and she just delights in the pain and the suffering and the torment of others. And in the very beginning of this novel, she basically captures the man that's been hunting her, and it's just brilliant. She captures him, and then she subjects him to the rest of the chapter and the chapter afterwards to torture like you cannot believe. Mental, psychological, physical, emotional. She really beats him down, but she doesn't kill him. So let me just read the first page. I really love this novel. I think it's underrated. And as I said, I think Silence of the Lambs, I think hand in hand I think of this. Archie doesn't know for sure that it's her until that moment. There is a dull bloom of warmth in his spine, his vision blurs, and then he knows that Gretchen Lowell is a killer. He realizes that he is being drugged, but it is too late. He fumbles for his gun, but he is ham-fisted and can only lift it awkwardly from his belt clip and hold it out as if it were a gift to her. She takes it and smiles, kissing him gently on the forehead. Then she reaches into his coat and takes a cell phone, turning it off and slipping it into her purse. He's almost paralyzed now, slumped in the leather chair in her home office, but his mind is a prison of clarity. She kneels down next to him, the way one might with a child, and puts her lips so close to his that they are almost kissing. His pulse throbs in his throat. He can't swallow. She smells like lilacs. "It's time to go, darling," she whispers. Okay, I'm not going to read on for more of that. Just to say that this is one of the most brutal chapters, one of the most brutal torture scenes right at the beginning of a novel that I've ever read, and it's truly worthy of being on this list. And that is Heartsick by Chelsea Cain. Okay, next up we got Rose Madder. Now I don't know who designed this cover, but I think it really sucks. It's kind of an empty picture frame, but never mind. Okay, this for me contains the most brutal opening paragraph chapter that Stephen King ever wrote, and of course it's about domestic violence, and it's about this absolute psychopath. But let's read about what happens to this woman, or how you find her. Just to give you a little hint. She sits in the corner trying to draw air out of the room, which seemed to have plenty just a few minutes ago, and now seems to have none. From what sounds like great distance, she can hear a thin whoosh, whoosh sound, and she knows this is air going down her throat, and then sliding back out again in a series of feverish little gasps. But that doesn't change the feeling that she's drowning here in the corner of her living room, looking at the shredded remains of the paperback novel she was reading when her husband came home. Not that she cares much. The pain is too great for her to worry about such minor matters as respiration. or how there seems to be no air in the air she is breathing. The pain has swallowed her, as a whale reputedly swallowed Jonah, that holy draft dodger. It throbs like a poisoned sun, glowing deep down in the middle of her, in a place where until tonight there was only the quiet sense of a new thing growing. Okay, I'm going to skip forward a little bit just because I can. Oh God, please, she says, please let the baby be okay. But now, as her breath finally begins to ease a little, she realizes that the baby is not okay. That he has made sure of that much anyway. When you're 4 months pregnant, the baby is still more a part of you than of itself. And when you're sitting in a corner with your hair stuck in strings to your sweaty cheeks, and it feels as if you swallowed a hot stone, something is putting sinister, slippery little kisses down the inside of her thighs. No, she whispers, no. Oh my dear sweet God, no. Good God, sweet God, dear God, no. Let it be sweat, she thinks. Let it be sweat. Or maybe I peed myself. Yes, that's probably it. It hurt so bad after he hit me the 3rd time that I peed myself and didn't even know it. That's it. Except it isn't sweat and it isn't pee. It's blood. Okay, so basically in this novel, in the opening couple of pages, a woman has had the shit beaten out of her by her husband, her abusive husband. That is pretty much the antagonist in this entire novel. And she's lying, and he's basically killed her unborn child while she's pregnant. Beats the crap out of her. So yeah, you can't really get more hardcore and terrifying than that. And I still think this is the most brutal opening to any Stephen King novel. Although there's another one coming up, but I wouldn't say it's brutal. So that's in 4th place, Rose Madder. Okay, in 3rd place we have Headhunter by Michael Slade. Now isn't this a delightful cover? One of my favourites. Yeah, pretty damn gruesome. And I'm not going to say anything about the opening paragraph. It's about the crime. I'm just going to read it for you. And hopefully that child next door screams a bit more, because it's kind of suitable for what I'm just going to be reading to you right now. And I have no words after reading this. The body hung upside down from the ceiling by nails driven through both feet. The head was missing, the neck severed to expose vein and muscle, artery and bone in a circle of raw flesh. What was left of the man was still dressed in the bright scarlet tunic of the Northwest Mountain Police, the arms with their sleeves decorated with gold braid, now dangling down towards the plank and sawdust floor. A pool of blood, as red as a tunic, spread out beneath the corpse. There was blood dripping from the tips of the dead man's fingers, but the splash of each drop as it hit the pool was drowned out by the slow, incessant, monotonous thud of a drum beating overhead. That drum beat came from up on the roof beyond the trapdoor in the ceiling. Thump, 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 thump. Okay, yeah. I don't know really what to say about that. If it didn't suck you into the story, into this particular crime horror novel, then I don't know what will. So yeah, that is Headhunter by Michael Slade. Okay, now we get to number 2 and number 1. And I was seriously umming and ahhing of where to put them. And I know this novel is truly iconic, and that is Stephen King, It. But wait till you see my one in first place. Now this is about a terrifying monster, and the opening is absolutely iconic, both in the movie and obviously in the novel. And I'm only going to read the first tiny little bit for you, which is a bit more subtle. But saying that, the chapter builds up and builds up to this absolutely monstrous encounter. Did I say monster? Terrifying, horrifying encounter. And things don't end well for children in this book. Just be warned. Some of them, not all of them. The terror, which would not end for another 28 years, if it ever did end, began, so far as I know or can tell, with a boat made from a sheet of newspaper floating down a gutter swollen with rain. Okay, yeah. And you got a little boy who's running down after the boat. But it builds up to that, and there's a way that Stephen King builds up the terror and the tension in that first chapter, and gets to the point where there's this encounter with, well, Pennywise the clown. You can see the thing up above there. I'm not using this cover, I'm using that cover on purpose, just because it's iconic and it's what the opening is all about. You know, and yeah, so this is in second place, and that is Stephen King, It. Okay everyone, now we come to number one, my most terrifying, shocking, horrifying opening to a horror novel of all time. And we got Carrion Comfort by Dan Simmons, and if you know, you know. Now I'm just going to read the prologue, part of the prologue, just so that you get an idea of where I'm coming from and why I feel this deservedly needs to be number one. Saul Lasky lay among the soon to die, in a camp of death, and thought about life. Saul shivered in the cold and dark and forced himself to remember details of a spring morning, golden light, touching the heavy limbs of willows by the stream, a field of white daisies beyond the stone buildings of his uncle's farm. The barracks was silent, except for an occasional rasping cough and the furtive burrowings of Musulmana, the living dead, vainly seeking warmth in the cold straw. Somewhere an old man coughed in a racking spasm, which signalled the end of a long and hopeless struggle. The old one would be dead by morning, or even if he survived the night, he would miss the morning roll call in the snow, which meant that he would be dead before morning ended. Okay. Saul curled away from the glare of the searchlight, pouring in through frosted panes, and pressed his back against the wooden mortises of his bunk. Splinters scraped at his spine and ribs through the thin cloth he wore. His leg began to shake uncontrollably as the cold and fatigue worked at him. He clutched at his thin thighs and squeezed until the shaking stopped. Okay everyone, so that was just a short teaser of what the opening chapter, the prologue of this book is about. Saul's one of the main protagonists, and in this particular death camp, the Nazi death camp, he meets one of the antagonists, which happens to be a kind of mind vampire. And yeah, it's a terrifying opening prologue or introduction, and it just gets worse from there. And later on, early on in the book, culminates in a game of chess unlike you've ever heard of before. Sick, twisted, nasty game of chess in a Nazi death camp that still haunts me today. And this book, yeah, the opening of the book in this Nazi death camp is just horrifying. Really, really horrifying. So I'm not going to read anymore. I'll leave that to your imagination. But that's for my choice for number one. And if you know, you know. That's Carrion Comfort by Dan Simmons. Okay everyone, so that's my video for today. If you enjoyed that, please be sure to like, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit that button, it really helps my channel. And yeah, please make a comment down in the spaces below. Let me know what you think about my list. What do you think is the most terrifying, shocking, horrifying ending? If you can hear the screams, that's what we want. We want those screams. We want that shock value. What novel do you think deserves to be in that place? Just join in with that toddler and scream and tell me what deserves to be in that place. I can only have a sense of humor about those people. Sorry. And yeah, be sure to like and subscribe, and take care of yourselves. Keep those pages turning, and cheers.